Good afternoon. I think I need to, as an American coming here, I think I need to start with an apology for something. And that something is Donald Trump. Every American I know, when they come to Europe, people say, what the fuck is going on with America? And I don't know. But that's part of the topic I want to talk about today, which is the idea of the death of the mass. And I've not really done this before. In fact, I don't even like PowerPoints anymore. By the way, this is a Hillary hat, just to be clear. That's why I'm wearing it. Hillary. I'm with her. So my premise on this new thing that I'm thinking about is that what the net killed was the mass media business model. And if the mass media business model is dead, so is the mass. And with that starts, I believe, an institutional revolution, going after many institutions, including media, marketing, retail, and certainly politics and government, and we'll get back to Trump in a few minutes. So that's my premise. Now, what killed mass media? It was self-induced. It could have saved itself, but it's not Silicon Valley's fault. Media had a great business for a century. It controlled the scarcity, right? I own the press, you don't. I get to say what goes on it, nya, nya, nya. That was the media business model, and it was beautiful for the oligarchs who had it for a long time. But the net creates abundance. Google understands how to manage abundance and how to take advantage of abundance. We in media still don't. Google, giant, huge Facebook, are both personal services companies. But my local newspaper still doesn't know where I live and work, still treats me like a mass like anybody else. That's not going to work. And what we've done is we've taken the old mass media business model of reach, of volume, of treating you all the same, and tried to bring that into this new world. And where that goes, we now know, inevitably, in the search for more traffic, you will always end up with cats and Kardashians. So we see media getting worse and worse and worse, and we know where this is going to go. Well, media did invent the mass media. We created this idea as a business model, and it was never true. I love these two quotes. Sociologist Raymond Williams, there are no masses, only ways of seeing people as masses. You're not a mass, you're not a mass, you're not a mass, but media treat you all the same. Another great theorist of media, John Dewey, says that it is not our nature to gather together in a mass, though frankly right now this looks like one, and it's a wonderful thing to see, but you're not a mass. A friend of mine at the University of Southern Denmark, Tom Pettit, and his colleague have a wonderful theory they call the Gutenberg parenthesis. And they say that before Gutenberg, media was passed around mouth to mouth, it was changed along the way, the scribes were trying to preserve ancient knowledge, there was very little sense of ownership or authorship, and they argue that the Gutenberg years, 600 years of them, a great run, but the Gutenberg years, soon to be over, were an exception to the natural order of things. In the Gutenberg years, knowledge became serial. Marshall McLuhan says that the sentence, and the line in this sentence as an example, becomes our organizing principle. Everything has a beginning and an end. It's contained. Content is contained. But now we return to a time when things are passed around mouth to mouth, click to click. They're changed and remixed along the way. There's very little sense of ownership and authorship. We are all authors. We are all audience. There's very little difference now. So there's a belief that what has replaced media is, of course, social media. And the argument right now, because of Facebook's instant articles and Google's AMP and a lot of new announcements last week at Google I/O, which were very impressive, the argument is that social media has taken our job. Bullshit. God did not give us in media the right to be the ones to make content and sell ads on it and make money from it. It was not a divine right. And I even think that the notion of social media is a misnomer. We in media call Facebook a medium. We call Google a medium because we think that it stole business from us. But they're very different. They are not mediators. They are not gatekeepers. They are enablers. They enable every one of us to broadcast live to the world on Facebook Live, and if you happen to be wearing a Chewbacca mask, get 140 million friggin' views. And if you haven't seen it, really watch it. It's wonderful. So what we in media now have to do as a disrupted institution is go to where the people are. My friend Jay Rosen at New York University says that he calls you and us the people formerly known as the audience. Content is a Gutenberg-era concept. We have to reinvent news and journalism and media from the ground up. What our relationship is with you, what we make to do that, how we are a service to you, and how we support it. And we're only beginning. And I will remind you that from the time that Gutenberg invented the press until the invention of the newspapers was a century and a half. 150 years. In that sense, we are in the year 1480 in Gutenberg time. We don't know what the fuck the internet is yet. It is far too soon to think that we can create rules and regulations about how this should operate, because we've barely begun to experiment and figure out what it ought to be. So, with the death of the mass media model comes the death of the media business, a challenge to all the institutions of media that we have to rethink it, but it doesn't stop there. Let me quickly go through some other sectors and institutions of society. Marketing. Obviously, with mass media goes away mass marketing. I don't think that it's the death of advertising, but I actually say that, believe it or not, because I want advertising to continue. Because I train journalism students, and I want them to eat. And journalists are fed primarily with advertising. So I don't think it'll go away. But there too, all we're doing is taking the old model over and trying to shoehorn it into this new world, and we create more crap. Native advertising is a lie. Programmatic advertising, as Gary Vaynerchuk said this morning, is a ridiculous deal where you get your ad, it becomes a commodity stuck on some page and you don't care where it is. We have to think for media as well as for marketers. The real goal is a relationship, is knowing you as an individual or a member of a community and serving you with greater value as a result. We're a long ways from that in both industries. We also, of course, have brands, manufacturing, retail. And I think this ends the idea of mass production. We're still in it, but from 5 minutes after you get it, no two phones are ever alike again. They are not a mass-produced item, except, of course, some poor child in China is making it. But in the sense of our experience with it, every one of our phones is unique. As Mark Zuckerberg says, no two people on earth ever see the same Facebook. This idea that we all buy the same things, we are made to buy it by marketers, is outmoded. And indeed, I think our real goal is to move the customer up the design chain so that the person who before was merely a customer, who sat at the end of the process, I've already made the product, I've designed it, I've manufactured it, I've marketed it, here, you're welcome, buy it. Well, I want to have more voice in that. I was so impressed this morning. I know it's 3 years out of date, but I haven't been here for a while. I was so geekily happy this morning to get into a Tesla cab at the airport. Yay, Amsterdam. How cool, right? And it's the very, very beginning of a car that's not like somebody else's car because software changes it. That's what has to happen, I think, to the rest of manufacturing, branding, and retail. Another institution, my own institution, education. It's a friggin' disaster. Yeah, I got tenure, so I can say anything I want, which is part of the problem, I'll grant, but I got it. Right, the problem is that education itself is a mass product. We turn out every student the same with the same answers to make the same widgets in the same jobs in the same factories. That's not how you invent Google. That's not how you invent Hyperloop, which we just saw. Our education system is not built to do that. Now, I teach entrepreneurial journalists, teach them to start their businesses. That's why I love this conference, to see all this entrepreneurship come together. I want to bring that to my field. Look at what Google announced last week. They're now going to offer their own certificates in education because the educational institutions are obviously failing them. And those certificates are based not on tests, but on portfolios of work, on creation. And you can't judge that all the same with a dot, whatever you call that damn thing my kids hated when you put little dots in, right? You've got to judge that individually. So education has to change. And now we come to the institution that I think we see this year across Europe and across the US that is being challenged greatly. Politics and government. That when we end the mass, what happens? Well, take some small heart in just this fact, this number. The total number of Americans who have voted for Donald Trump is low double-digit millions, 10, 12 million, out of a nation of 300 million people. His Twitter followers are rampant. They're not that many people. But it was enough to take over, indeed, try to destroy the Republican Party. And what we see in this case is that a small group of people, relatively speaking, can gather together around anything, even a jerk, and can challenge an institution that has gone on for well over a century. That's possible today, and it also challenges the fundamental political system that we have in the US, different from your systems in Europe, where we are forced into two masses, one red, one blue. And that's the way it all worked, was we'd have to get together. Well, no more. And we don't have a system that figures out how to do this. We don't know what we're going to do. Now, I generally celebrate the idea of the democratization of the world and empowering people, and there's good news that comes from this, right? Arab Spring, Occupy Wall Street, the Indignados, voices that couldn't be heard. But of course, there's bad news. Arab Spring becomes Arab devolution, Trump, Le Pen, Hofer, thank you, Austria, for not really electing him. Yeah, hand for that as well, and the Brexit. I think where we're going in way ridiculously oversimplistic terms, but to go back to this notion of the Google parenthesis, from a tribal world to a city-state world, the nation world really comes after Gutenberg, after we can gather together around literacy, languages, printing, books, knowledge, culture that came from the book era. The internet, technology, and transportation made us global, but now I wonder, I'm just asking, I'd love to hear what you say on Twitter back to me. Are we going back to a tribal world where we identify and become affiliated with communities that we determine? Now you can ask about this, what could possibly go wrong? Well, yes, a lot could. I'm generally, to a fault, an optimist about what the internet can do for us in society. But we have to acknowledge that many things can go wrong, right? The mass becomes the mob. The trolls take over because they can. We see this hatred of the other because we've gathered so closely in our small community that we can't appreciate the diversity of other communities. We're afraid of them when they come in. There is a tragedy to openness. As much as I celebrate openness, Twitter being an open platform, which enables people to say whatever they want, also enables the fucking trolls to take it over. Is it inevitable that openness has to lead to incivility? We don't know yet. And certainly we've learned in the Arab Spring, and we're learning in other nations now, that it is a lot easier to challenge than to build. This shouldn't be surprising at all. Building a new nation, a new society, a new organizational structure for society is obviously going to take time. I bring you back to the fact that it's the year 1480. So, what can we do about this? Spend a few minutes on this and then I'm done. Then you can drink. I believe in media and other areas we have to enter into a relationship strategy where the key skill is listening. I started a new degree with a colleague at my school in what we call social journalism, where we start not with content, not with story pitches, not with our ideas, but the students are forced to go and find a community that defines itself as a community, Listen to that community, observe that community, understand that community's needs and goals, then bring our new tools to bear to help them with their needs and goals, and in the end, judge our success or failure on whether or not they met their goals, not on our old metrics of, did you like my story? How often did you click on my story? Did you spare my story? Did you send it around Facebook? Those are all egotistical messages. It is critical that we learn to see people in all these institutions, in politics, government, education, media, marketing, manufacturing, design. We must see people as individuals and members of communities, no longer as a faceless, anonymous mass of people all the same. And keep in mind that communities are internally defined. There is no such thing as a millennial. That is an external demographic put on by marketers trying to understand. Go ahead and applaud that millennial. It's bullshit. You have to listen to what communities people actually feel they are a member of. What affinities do they actually have before you can serve them? And in that, we must value diversity and equity across that, and not just give it lip service. Speaking of service, I think we have to stop thinking of things as product. Now, I talk a lot these days about how we have to change media into product development, because that's our language right now. But product is a dangerous word, because product presumes that it is a one-way thing that is finished and we're done with it. If we instead think of all these things, journalism, media, education, government, politics, manufacturing, even marketing, as services that provide tools, then we're better off. Don't think about the product, think about the people and the communities you're serving. We have to get past this idea of scale for scale's sake. We're talking about that a lot these days, but what that leads to, once again, is cats and Kardashians. And so what we measure in media is page views, unique users, reach, frequency. Instead, we need to measure, I think, how many relationships we have with people. What do we know about you? Why did you reveal yourself? Because we gave you value in return. What is the value that you got and we got in having a relationship of trust? That's where we have to go. Now, I still believe that we have to have an open world, that openness is the real value of the net. Openness is what enables people to speak who never could be heard before. That's part of what's happening with Donald Trump. People who felt frustrated, whom media ignored. Some of them deserve to be ignored, frankly, because they're racist, misogynist assholes and fools. But even so, they now have a voice. What do we do about that as a society? I think in journalism, we work ever harder to bring fact-checking and perspective and intelligence to this debate, but we're not doing that. In our old mass media business model of page views, we're relishing it. Network presidents are delighted with Donald Trump because he's making them money. It is a cynical moral failure that is going on because we are still seeing the world as mass. So what we have to do, I think, is build with openness, build with optimism, while protecting with pessimism, while understanding that, of course, every system that can be gamed will be gamed, but that doesn't mean that the entire world is now assholes. Yes, Donald Trump has taken over the media of America. I apologize. I can't wait to vote for Hillary Clinton twice in New Jersey and in the nation. I hope to hell that she becomes the president of the United States. Number one, because that sentence, she and president, is very important. And number two, because she's the only qualified person and she's sane. But we also have to recognize not so much that we have to listen to the misogyny and the bigotry and the foolishness and the stupidity of Donald Trump and his followers, but we have to understand the frustration and the structure and figure out how to build a new society around this with optimism. So I say, death to the mass, but long live relationships. Thank you very much, and go drink.